There is a very specific, very quiet kind of dread that really haunts e-commerce operators.
Oh, absolutely. It's the worst.
Right. It is not that flashy, adrenaline-pumping fear of your website crashing in the middle of a massive Black Friday sale. It's this creeping daily anxiety of like double counting revenue.
Yeah, or worse, overselling inventory you don't actually have.
Exactly. And all because someone on your team is sitting in an office somewhere, frantically copying orders from Shopify into your back office system by hand. Like, if you have ever watched your inventory counts silently drift apart between two screens and just felt that pit in your stomach, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that quiet fear is basically the sound of operational debt accumulating. And it usually forces a company to finally confront the reality of their systems because eventually, the manual data entry becomes a bottleneck that actively just chokes your business growth.
Which is exactly why today we're digging into a stack of system architecture guides. We really want to figure out how to bridge that gap between Shopify and your back office enterprise resource planning system, your ERP. So our mission for this deep dive is to serve as your roadmap.
Right.
We are cutting through all the technical jargon to look at the exact costs, the structural traps, and, well, the fundamental decisions you have to make to connect these two massive engines without losing your mind or your data.
Yeah, and I think we should establish right away that connecting an ERP to Shopify isn't just about plugging two cords together and, hoping the data flows.
Right.
You're merging two systems that view the world in fundamentally different ways. Like, Shopify is built entirely around the customer experience and the transaction itself.
Okay.
But an ERP is built around rigid financial ledgers, procurement, warehouse logistics, so bridging them is really a fundamental decision about data ownership.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can even talk about the tools to build that bridge, we have to look at what is actually driving across it, right? And the source material establishes this golden rule for this. They call it the source of truth.
Yes. So an integration is not a magic two-way mirror where everything simply reflects perfectly on both sides.
Okay.
For every single data field, whether that's a product variant, a price, or an inventory count, one system and only one system must be the designated owner. Because if you don't explicitly define that owner in your architecture, you create a scenario where the last system to write the data silently wins. And that's when numbers drift.
It's like two people trying to drive the same car with two different steering wheels. Like, if you don't decide who is steering which turn, you're going to crash.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
But I have to ask, surely modern software is smart enough to just, merge the information, right? If both systems are pinging each other in the cloud in real time, why can't they just read a timestamp and let the most recent update win?
What's fascinating here is that, no, they really can't. Because the most recent update isn't always the operationally correct one.
Oh, interesting.
Let's look at inventory, right? If your ERP manages stock across, say, 5 physical warehouses, it understands the reality of pallets moving, or items being quarantined for damage, or stock reserved for wholesale.
Right, the physical world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Shopify only understands what is available to sell digitally. So if you let Shopify's timestamp overwrite the ERP just because a customer bought something online,
Oh, I see.
Shopify might accidentally erase the fact that a forklift just destroyed a pallet in the warehouse 5 minutes ago. The physical reality has to override the digital timestamp.
So the ERP has to be the strict owner of inventory.
Absolutely.
And the guide notes that your Shopify locations have to perfectly map to those ERP warehouses with absolutely zero margin for ambiguity.
Yes, zero.
But what about the other data, like orders and pricing?
Well, orders naturally flow from Shopify into the ERP.
Yeah.
Because Shopify is where the customer actually checks out. Pricing, on the other hand, usually flows from the ERP to Shopify, because the ERP is where your cost of goods sold lives, so it dictates the margins.
That seems straightforward enough, at least until you actually look at a real-world transaction, because the source material highlights this massive pitfall called the order edit trap. And this is where that rigid ownership structure gets violently stress-tested.
Yeah, this is huge. Integrations rarely fail on what developers call the happy path.
The happy path?
Right, where a customer buys a shirt, the order flows to ERP, the warehouse ships it, the tracking number goes back to Shopify. The happy path works beautifully. Integrations fail the moment a customer changes their mind. They fail on edits, cancellations, and refunds.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's walk through the mechanics of that. Say a customer places an order for 2 items. They pay. The order flows to the ERP. 10 minutes later, they realize they clicked the wrong size for one item, or they just decide they don't want it.
Happens all the time.
Right. They reach out, or they use a self-serve portal to remove the item. Shopify issues a partial refund. What happens in the ERP?
Well, if you are using a naive out-of-the-box sync, you end up with what the documentation calls an orphan refund.
An orphan refund?
Yeah. Shopify tells the ERP, hey, we refunded $50. And the ERP just stares at that information and completely freezes.
Because it doesn't know what the $50 correlates to.
Precisely. Because ERP ledgers operate on strict double-entry bookkeeping.
Right.
Every financial action requires an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah.
So to record a refund, the ERP needs to know if physical goods were actually returned to the warehouse to restock the asset account, or if the goods were damaged, or if they never shipped in the first place.
Wow, okay.
A simple $0 change or a flat $50 deduction without a physical inventory movement mathematically breaks the ERP's brain. It just cannot balance the ledger.
And it is wild how blunt the documentation for these systems is about this. Like, Microsoft's own manual for their Dynamics 365 Business Central connector flat out states that a zero-amount Shopify refund cannot be converted to a credit memo.
Yep.
And Saligo's NetSuite documentation warns that modified orders only sync if the fulfillment process hasn't been initiated. Like, once something ships, edits just stop flowing entirely.
It is a hard limitation of how financial software enforces rules. If a simple connector tries to retroactively modify a financial ledger when the payment gateway has already processed a partial return, it triggers an auditing nightmare.
So you have to design for refunds from day one.
Exactly. If you only build for the happy path, your accounting team is going to spend their entire week manually untangling those orphan refunds anyway.
Which completely defeats the purpose of paying for automation in the first place. So knowing that the structural differences are this severe, how do businesses actually connect these systems? Like, when a company gets tired of manual data entry, where do they start? The guide outlines 3 distinct paths, and the first one relies on certified connectors.
Right. So Shopify runs a global ERP program, which launched in October 2021, and it features first-party and certified apps.
Okay.
If your chosen ERP is on this VIP list, and your business logic is standard, meaning you don't have bizarre, bespoke routing rules, this is unequivocally the best starting point.
Looking at the landscape here, you have players like Microsoft Dynamics 365, Acumatica, and Brightpearl by Sage, and a lot of these boast that they are, quote, free to install.
Right?
But if you look at Oracle NetSuite, the pricing structure gets really interesting. They start at around $200 a month for a standard direct-to-consumer sync. But the moment you want B2B features, it jumps to over $900 a month. Why such a massive premium just to sync business customers?
Because B2B fundamentally alters the architecture of the transaction. A direct-to-consumer order is really simple. They pay with a credit card, you ship the item.
Right.
In B2B, a customer might have a negotiated price catalog, net 30 payment terms, maybe a specific credit limit. When they place an order, the integration has to query the ERP in real time to check their credit limit, and then it has to post an open invoice back to the ledger instead of a simple cash receipt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you're paying that $900 premium for the complex financial routing required to handle invoice posting.
That definitely makes the free-to-install options look pretty appealing. But wait, free-to-install sounds like a trap. Is it actually free?
Well, there is always a cost. While there might not be a connector fee on the Shopify side for an app like Dynamics 365, you are still paying your heavy enterprise licensing fees to Microsoft.
Right.
The connector is just a perk of the software you already rent. But the real hidden cost of these certified connectors is what we can call the maintenance tax.
The maintenance tax, meaning you are locked into their update schedule.
You are entirely on their timeline. So the Microsoft connector, for instance, relies on a specific API version, let's say version 20.25.07. Now, Shopify deprecates old APIs regularly to keep their systems fast and secure.
Okay.
If Shopify retires that version in July 2026, Microsoft will release an update to the connector. But to use that new connector, you might have to upgrade your entire massive back-office ERP system to a newer version.
Oh, man.
Yeah. If you aren't ready to do a massive ERP upgrade, your sync simply breaks. You do not control the upgrade cadence. The vendor does.
So you could find yourself forced into a major IT project just to keep your online orders flowing.
Exactly.
That brings up the next logical question. What if a business gets tired of being held hostage by their vendor's roadmap? Or what if their ERP isn't even on that VIP list? Systems like SAP Business One, Epicor Profit 21, or Syspro.
Then you graduate to the second path, which is middleware. Formally, this is known as an IPS, or Integration Platform as a Service.
Right. So this is a standalone software platform that sits directly between Shopify and the ERP, acting kind of like a universal translator.
Exactly. Instead of a direct cord connecting the two systems, both systems plug into the middleware. If Shopify sends data in a format called JSON and your legacy ERP only understands XML files, the IOKS intercepts the data, translates it, maps the specific fields to where they need to go, and delivers it safely.
The source outlines some of the players here. For a system like SAP Business One, you might use a third-party app like eShopSync for around $100 a month, or ShopHive for Epicor at around $400.
Right.
But if you need heavier orchestration, say you are routing orders to a third-party logistics provider, syncing with Shopify, and updating an ERP all at the exact same time, the costs go through the roof.
Oh, they do.
Like, the median buyer for a platform like Boomi is paying roughly $45,000 a year. Soligo is around $15,000. Even Illumio starts at around €500 a month. I mean, just imagine the sheer volume of data operations required to justify spending 45 grand a year just on the software moving your data around.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it sounds staggering.
Hmm.
But imagine you are managing a global storefront. To justify spending that kind of money, you really have to look at the sheer volume and complexity of your operations.
Right.
If you are doing millions in revenue, the cost of a draft order or the cost of hiring a massive team of developers to write that translation layer from scratch far exceeds the licensing fee. Middleware basically saves you from the monumental technical debt of writing raw code.
It provides the infrastructure so you just have to configure the rules rather than building the engine yourself.
Exactly.
But there is a ceiling to that too, right? What happens when your business logic is so uniquely bespoke or your sheer volume of data is so massive that even a heavy middleware platform starts buckling under the pressure?
Then you enter the third path, the developer's domain. This means building a custom integration completely from scratch, communicating directly against Shopify's admin GraphQL API.
This is the deep end of the pool. Maximum control, but maximum responsibility. The guide notes a production-grade custom build usually runs between $5,000 to $15,000, scaling up to $50,000 or more for enterprise multi-store setups.
The reason for those costs really comes down to the brutal mechanics of scale.
Okay.
The source includes a great example from an integration agency. Imagine you have 50,000 unique products, your SKUs spread across 12 different physical warehouses.
That's a lot of stock.
Right. And the constant movement of that stock could easily generate 600,000 inventory mutations every single day.
Let's pause on the word mutations because that is a very specific GraphQL term.
Yeah, so GraphQL is a query language that lets you ask a server for precisely the data you want. Older systems would just dump a massive file on your desk, even if you only wanted to check one single price.
Which is super inefficient.
Extremely. GraphQL is surgical. But when you want to change data, like updating an inventory count that is called a mutation, you're structurally altering the database. So 600,000 of those alterations a day is a massive load on a server.
But if we just need to know when an order happens, why can't we just rely on webhooks? I mean, they are essentially just real-time event pushes, right? Shopify pings the ERP and says, hey, an order happened, here is the data.
Well, webhooks are fantastic for real-time triggers, but their delivery is not guaranteed. If Shopify fires a webhook at 2 in the morning and your ERP server happens to be rebooting for maintenance, that webhook bounces. It vanishes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Shopify is going to hold on to it forever. So if you rely solely on webhooks, every little server blip creates permanent inventory drift.
Which is why a custom build requires what developers call tech primitives. You can't just build the trigger, you have to build the safety nets.
Yes. And the most important primitive is the reconciliation loop.
Right.
This is an automated, scheduled job, kind of like a digital auditor, that runs every hour or every night. It pulls the total inventory table from Shopify, pulls the table from the ERP, compares them side by side, finds the discrepancies caused by missed webhooks, and forcibly repairs the drift.
The source also highlights this concept of back pressure. I like to think of back pressure like a bouncer at a really busy nightclub.
I like that.
If a massive order spike hits during a flash sale, a cheap point-to-point integration just jams the door. It fires every single request at the ERP at once. Well, what happens? The API rate limits kick in, the door slams shut, and the system crashes, dropping orders.
Exactly.
A good custom build acts like that bouncer. It places the incoming data into a queue, letting them in one by one. The data sync might slow down, but the system degrades gracefully instead of collapsing.
That queuing system is mandatory because API limits are a hard mathematical wall. Shopify actively monitors how heavy your requests are. They use a system called calculated query cost.
This is where we need to dig in, because they don't just count how many times you knock on the door, they measure how hard you are hitting it, right?
Yeah. Asking Shopify for a single product price is a very light knock. It might cost 1 point.
Right.
But asking Shopify to update 50,000 SKUs across 12 warehouses simultaneously, that's taking a battering ram to the server.
Right.
So Shopify assigns that a massive query cost. On a standard Shopify plan, you are limited to 100 points of calculated query cost per second. If your integration tries to push 500 points of data in a second, Shopify blocks it to protect the platform.
But if you upgrade to Shopify Plus, their enterprise tier, that limit jumps to 1,000 points a second, which naturally leads into a massive misconception in the ecosystem. The idea that you are forced to upgrade to Shopify Plus just to survive an ERP integration.
It is a very common and very expensive assumption, especially for businesses moving into wholesale. But as of an April 2026 rollout, it is definitively false. Shopify moved core B2B features well below the Plus tier.
This is a huge detail for operational budgets, like features like company profiles, payment terms, and up to 3 unique B2B pricing catalogs now work on the basic plan, which is just $39 a month, as well as the Grow and Advanced tiers.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
You only actually need Shopify Plus if your business model requires unlimited catalogs, complex per-fulfillment payments, or if your transaction volume is so high that your custom integration is constantly hitting that 100-point ceiling and you desperately need the 1,000-point limit.
And understanding your actual plan requirements is part of a broader strategy of risk mitigation. Because, building the integration is really only half the battle. Launching it is where companies usually destroy their own operations.
Yes, true.
The source provides a cutover playbook for how to launch safely.
And the absolute golden rule of the playbook: never do a big bang sync. Do not just plug the systems in and turn everything on at once on a random Tuesday morning.
Please don't. A Big Bang launch basically guarantees race conditions. If Shopify is trying to push yesterday's orders into the ERP at the exact same moment the ERP is trying to push today's inventory to Shopify, they collide.
Yikes.
Yeah, you create a catastrophic data mess that takes months of manual auditing to untangle.
So the playbook demands a very disciplined, phased approach. You rehearse everything in a separate development store. You painstakingly map your source of truth field by field. You pilot the sync on a small subset of SKUs first. And there is a brilliant operational safeguard in here regarding inventory buffers.
Yes. During the actual cutover, you deliberately sync a slightly lower inventory quantity than you actually possess in the physical warehouse.
Because if there is a lag or a missed update while the systems are switching over, you have a physical safety net. You ensure you don't accidentally oversell items to a live customer while the digital brains are syncing up.
Exactly. And even with all those safeguards, you must commit to reconciling the data by hand for the first few weeks. You really have to monitor the machine while it learns to walk.
The source also points out some major red flags to watch out for if you are hiring an agency to build this bridge for you. Like, if an integrator knows your ERP inside and out but has no actual track record with Shopify's GraphQL API, walk away.
Yep.
If they propose an architecture with no error queues, meaning if a sync fails, it just vanishes into the void instead of sending an alert walk away. And most importantly, always ask where your customers IFN'd. Personally identifiable information, their names, their addresses, actually lives when it is transiting through middleware.
Data transit security is totally non-negotiable. When data leaves Shopify and hits an IPS translation layer before moving to the ERP, does it temporarily sit on a server owned by the middleware company?
Good question.
If a vendor cannot clearly explain the exact geographic and digital location of your customer's data while it is in transit, there's a hard stop.
So what does this all mean? We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by identifying the absolute necessity of defining a strict source of truth to prevent silent data drift. We explored the messy reality of the order edit trap and why double entry ledgers reject naive $0 refunds.
Right.
And we navigated the 3 distinct paths: the tightly bound certified connectors, the heavy translation layers of an IPS, and the high-volume, tech-heavy custom builds using GraphQL.
The path a business chooses ultimately comes down to matching their operational reality, not just listening to the loudest sales pitch. But this raises an important question, a structural question to think about. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about the necessity of mapping a rigid, static source of truth. But what happens to this highly engineered architecture when a business model suddenly pivots?
How do you mean?
Well, If you spend months building a strict architecture optimized for direct-to-consumer sales, and then you decide to launch a massive B2B wholesale wing overnight, as Shopify's newer lower-tier plans now make incredibly easy to do, does your meticulously planned single-owner data map shatter? Does the very integration you built to scale your business suddenly become the rigid bottleneck that prevents it from evolving?
Wow. That is a phenomenal tension to leave off on. The balance between the stability you need today and the flexibility you're going to demand tomorrow. I highly encourage you to look closely at your own tech stacks, look at those manual data entry tasks your team is doing, and ask yourself honestly, who is really in the driver's seat of your data? Because if you don't know who is steering, it is only a matter of time before you crash. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Catch you next time.